Welcome to the Teach Joyfully podcast, where we talk about all things elementary teaching with some mom stuff thrown in. I'm Lisa Burns, a teacher success coach, veteran elementary teacher, and mom of 5. I'll be your host. Thanks for joining me today. So today, let's talk about mentor texts. I'm sure you've at least heard the term mentor text being bandied about in education. But what are they and how do you use them? That's not always made clear. So let me make it abundantly clear. Mentor texts are texts that serve as examples or jumping off points for teaching writing and reading. They're examples of good writing for our students. We use them to study authors' craft and how it affects us as readers and how we can stretch ourselves to reach new skills as writers. So how do you choose a mentor text? Well, choosing a mentor text can seem really difficult, but it's actually not as hard as you think it is. When choosing text, think about, do you think that it's good? Do you think that article, that book, that poem, whatever it is you're using as a mentor text, do you think it's good? Do you like it? Then think, will your students understand it? If it is beyond their comprehension level, then it's not a good text. But if your students could understand it, and especially if they'd enjoy it, then it's a great text. And then think about, does it apply to what you're trying to teach or planning to teach? Will your students be able to identify and see what it is the point you're trying to make? Essentially, is it a good model? If it is, and it answers all three of those questions, you've got a mentor text. Now, whether you already know all about mentor texts and you already use them, or you've never used a mentor text in your life, or somewhere in between, how many ways do you use a mentor text? Do you know that you can use a mentor text for more than just reading and writing? You can. And do you know that you can use a mentor text for all kinds of things in reading and writing, not just examples of techniques? You can. I can give you 11 ways to use a mentor text off the top of my head. Let's imagine I'm going to use Cynthia Ryland's The Relatives Came with my class. First read, I would help. So here we go. I would use it as a first read. We would predict, picture walk, front load, and activate all that schema, all that background knowledge, but also provide background knowledge for students who maybe don't understand. You might have English language learners in your class. You might have kids who have never had a family come together in this kind of a way. And so you need to provide whatever background knowledge they need in that moment as well. I point out concepts of print when I read with younger students as needed for any particular class. So things like noticing that there's spaces between the words, or thinking about which direction I'm going to go with the print. I think aloud as I go. It's always surprising how many students don't really have a solid grasp on concepts of print, and having them pointed out to them and talked about in the context of a story really drives the point home. Always, I'm thinking aloud as I go. I'm spending time wondering out loud and noticing the main characters. We talk about the setting and the problem. Students chime in and we just have a fun time with the story, but also, well, I'm teaching them little bits and parts all along the way. It just sounds like fun to them, but they are learning a ton. At the end, we are retelling the story, beginning, middle, and end with a partner. That's our first read. On a second read, I am demonstrating fluency as I read. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't demonstrate fluency when I read the first time. I just didn't talk about it. I am talking about it this time. We talk about how to use the punctuation by making mistakes and correcting ourselves. We talk about how that changes how the story sounds in our heads or to whoever we're reading to. We're talking about all the things that make for good, fluent readers. Good readers create pictures in their head as well. So we're also talking about having students create pictures in their heads from the author's words. That means that sometimes I might have one scene in the story where I'm not showing any pictures to students. They have a piece of paper and they are drawing what is happening in the scene just from the words as I read them. It's a fun activity, and boy, does it help them learn how to do pictures in their heads. You'd be surprised how many students do not intuitively know how to make a picture in their head as they're reading. They really don't. And this is something that good readers do. And it's really an essential piece to becoming a good reader, to be able to visualize that story. So this is good training. So here's the third one. I do a third read. And on this one, as I read the story again, I'm not actually going to read the entire story. I'm going to skim, and we're going to talk about bits and parts of the story, but then we're going to read the end. And this is where we extend. We're going to extend the learning using what we know from this gathering and the hints at the end of the story to make predictions about what will happen the next time this family gets together, because that is exactly hinted at the end of the story. It is a perfect segue into writing. So now we head into writing. So a fourth way that I could use this text would be to have students sequence. They can draw pictures for beginning, middle, and end, and then they can write about them as well. They can put the story into sequence. If you have older students, they can write a short summary. But I don't typically just throw this at students. I guide them through it with some framing and some sort of a flow chart so that they can get their ideas down with the right vocabulary to turn it into a great summary. Not too long, not too short, but just enough, but also with some good vocabulary in there that actually makes for a good read, as opposed to just, well, the story is about. How boring is that? And as a teacher, who wants to read 25 of those? The fifth way I use this is to reinforce the idea of word choice and voice in a story. This is the perfect book for this. The vocabulary in this book is so rich, and so is the imagery created by Cynthia Ryland's choice of words. Sometimes I'll have students do an activity like this. I'll take one page in the story for one small piece, and I will have the students take those words and rewrite the words, change them 2 different times with different words. So we're talking about synonyms, we're talking about figurative language, we're talking about all kinds of things, word choice and voice, and they are actually having to change the words with something that must mean the same thing and convey the same message. And then we talk about what happens to the mental imagery as we read the original and the other 2 versions that they created. It's really interesting to see what happens, and it drives the point home of the value of word choice and voice to students. The next way I would jump off from this book would be to have students describe their classroom, lunchroom, or playground with words that create the same kind of mental imagery that is similar to what's going on in the book. And that is the next step to really stretch them and apply what they've now learned. They can refer back to the book. You can talk through it a little bit and talk about what Cynthia Ryland does and remind them of all that great word choice and voice, and then let them have at it. The next way you could use this book would be right about a time when your family gets together. It could be Thanksgiving, it could be another special occasion, whatever it is. Maybe your family, one of your students' families regularly does family reunions, or maybe they do Sunday dinner every Sunday and all the family comes together. Whatever it is, when they have family that comes to visit, even just for a couple of hours, that's what you want them to write about, a time when they get together as a family. Now, I know that not all families get together and it's a joyful occasion. If they can't think of one or don't want to write about an occasion when their family gets together, they can write about what they wish they had with their family get together. Maybe they have hardly any relatives that live close by and they wish that their grandparents lived close or all their cousins lived close. Or maybe they wish they had a bunch of cousins when they don't. They can write a story about what they wish they had at a family gathering as well. The 8th way that you can use this book is to have students write that sequel. At the end of the story, remember that third read? We had students predict what might happen the next time that this family gets together. Well, guess what? They can take that and they can write a sequel because now they have all those ideas that you thought of together as a class. The 9th way that I could use this mentor text would be after doing some research, we could write about the first Thanksgiving using the same type of mental imagery. How cool would that be? And the 10th way to use this story would be to compare and contrast the story with either the first Thanksgiving or some other story or personal event when people get together for a large gathering. And number 11, using clues from the story, you can estimate how many people you think were together in this house and be ready with your evidence. Yes, you can do a little bit of math too. As you can see, teaching from a mentor text gives endless possibilities for teaching everything students need to learn in reading and writing and some other subjects in a context that is both enjoyable and meaningful. That means that learning is more likely to stick. And isn't that what we want? So here's your marching orders. Find a good mentor text. Do you think it's a good text? Will your students understand it? And does it fit with what you're trying to teach? If it does, you've got a winner. Now, consider your grade level and the standards your students need instruction in. Do they need concepts of print still, or are they past all that? Is that all mastered? So if they need any of those things, remember you're going to add that in as you're reading. Plan your lesson to include both reading and writing. There is no reason to only use a text for writing or only use a text for reading. If you're using it for one, use it for both. Make it all flow. Add in any science, social studies, or even math that might possibly go with this mentor text. If it's not, that's fine. Even if it's just some review concepts, if there's a way that you can tie it back into other things that your students have learned or are learning, even better. It just reinforces and keeps that learning going. I have links to all kinds of resources, including a mentor text cheat sheet for you. It's all in the show notes. You can find it at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. Or you can grab that free cheat sheet directly at www.hopeineducation.com/vault. So that's it, my teacher friends. We're out of time and I'm out of breath. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked today's episode, I would love it if you'd go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave a review. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Also, you can continue the conversation online with me in my Facebook group, the Teach Joyfully Podcast Community, where elementary teachers can connect, get help, and encouragement for all kinds of education and parenting topics. You can find the show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in today's episode on my website at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. And remember, a happy teacher is a good teacher. Until next time, teach joyfully and take care of you.